All right, so the last time we went over these user controls. So in other words, we went through and we looked at, I'm hoping that via the project that you were asked to do, that there's nothing in here that doesn't make sense. Is that fair to assume? Okay. So you know buttons, you know text fields. The seek bar is a new one. All right. And again, there's a lot of different ways that this could be used. I don't know if we'll have time to do this or not. In the past, I've had students create a simple tip calculator, and it isn't that hard to do. But when we first do it, we just set up an interface that kind of looks like this. So you say, there'll be like a text view here that'll say like bill, and then you put it in amount, and tip, and you'll put it in amount, and then it'll have total, and we'll put this in as a percent, so then we'll have like tip total, and then total bill. Does that make sense? So if you came in here and you said, okay, my bill is $100, the tip should be 20%. Okay, so the tip total should be $20, and the total bill should be $120. We did that. It's not very hard to do, as you could probably guess. Then we changed it to where we made this a seek bar. And it could go literally, so we put the word, just a percent sign there. And it could go from 0, you had a terrible service. And I mean, most people, 25 seems to be like a pretty good number, okay? And you could go back and forth, and as you adjusted that, it would automatically adjust this, and it would automatically adjust that. All right, would you like to go through an example of how to do that? Would that help you in the stuff that you're doing for your project or whatever? Not this second, but we can do that like tomorrow or something like that, okay? All right. But there's uses for the seek bar is what I'm saying. If you got high-low type of things or whatever, but the one that I showed you is the one you like here. The spinner is the one you're going to use a lot. All right? Okay. We talked about focus. You know what focus is. You know how to get the focus. There's nothing there. I don't think there's worth going over anything again about buttons because we talked about it. We went through this stuff. I don't think there's, like I said, I don't think there's much of anything there that we haven't talked about. All right. This is what I wanted to show you because this would have made more sense in trying to put a project online. So I'll just hold off on that. Checkboxes, I'm taking for granted that you didn't have any problems with checkboxes on that form or with radio buttons. All right, radio buttons, just get used to putting them into a radio button group. We've talked about that before. There we go. All right, now we're not going to make a menu now, but what we're going to do is we're going to go over the rest of the chapter right now, okay? And when we get done with the chapter, I'm going to have you start to build an interface for the next project that we'll start working on tomorrow as a class. It doesn't sound like it, but the code that you put in there, it's not that it's a lot of code, it's enough, but it's working with a recycler view, so it's very different from anything we've done thus far. All right, so I'm going to walk you through all the steps to doing it. Okay, and my goal is that I don't know if we'll finish it all tomorrow or we won't finish it all tomorrow, etc. But maybe, like I said, first we'll do that tip calculator, and then hopefully by tomorrow and Wednesday we can finish this up. Then I'm going to ask you to basically replicate it. In other words, you're going to do something very similar to that. Okay, all right. Now, when you work with menus, there's a lot of different ways that you can set up menus. We're just going to set one up like this. To me, that's the standard way. All right. And what we'll have is in our project, so if I go back to here, okay, and you go and take a look at this, in our project, it doesn't have it right now. But up here, we'll have like the 3 dots. And when you click, we're going to allow you to sort on different fields. And that's what we're going to do in our project. And so we'll set up a menu that'll allow us to sort in different ways. Okay. All right. But they go through this and they say, hey, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can set up menus. Again, ours will be more like this. Now, when you do this, you've got a lot of choices. One choice is what a lot of people do is they take their standard things and they put them in there as icons. So that would be search, of course. I don't know what this is, if you like something or whatever. And then this is your overflow area. All right. Now we're not even going to use any icons because we're just going to be doing searching. And I didn't, I'm sorry, sorting. And if we were doing a search, it would be fine. So like with your restaurant thing, you might want to put a search in there, something like that. All right. But we're going to do something more like this one. So we'll walk through these steps tomorrow. They're not really that difficult. So we'll have something like this. Okay. So the idea is, when we go here tomorrow, we're going to have like a list in this recycler view. And we'll be able to sort it either on last name, or we're probably going to, I just was thinking about it, use that same presidents thing I had the C# people using. But we will include all 46 presidents. And you'll be able to flip your way through it. And then you'll be able to click on any president. Okay. And if you want, if you long click on them, you'll be able to, so let's say you put the wrong year that they served or whatever in, you'll be able to change it. Or you spelled Barack wrong or something like that. And we'll put a picture in there too. So you'll have all that stuff. All right. So you'll have, and then we'll have a menu that'll allow you to sort on last name in ascending or descending order. And it will allow you to sort on when they served. So if by default, we'll put it in there, we'll have Washington first and we'll go all the way through Biden. Does that make sense? But if you did it in reverse, of course, it would go the other way type of thing. All right. So like I said, well, I don't want to walk through this because we are going to do this together. Now the next section that's in here, I'm just going to jump down here quickly. When you are working with an app that's basically going to be being used on the phone, a lot of people don't even like menus because they don't have, their phones aren't that big anyway. Now this morning, Miss Kincaid came in. We actually met for the first time in person today, and we were talking, and I showed her the site. She actually loves it. I thought she might like it, but she said, no, that's everything I want. So that's fine. But she said, am I able to go and make changes? Like, I showed her how to make changes. She said, can I do that easily, swap stuff in from my phone? She said, I basically live on my phone. I do everything on my phone. I said, yeah. I said, as long as you're okay with small text and whatever. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Again, everybody's different. The next section that's in here, okay, is, as it says, it's a screen navigation section, okay? And what they will mention in here is they start talking about navigation and different things, how you can move back and forth. And do you want to move back and forth from screen to screen? Do you want to set it up in a hierarchical way? It just depends. It depends on what your app is. All right. And the hierarchical way, I look at it as being more like a book report when you go from very general to very specific. So how you want to let the person iterate their way through. That's going to matter a lot more if you've got a lot of activities. All right. But what we've done so far, we've had no more than maybe 3 activities. So it's not really a big thing to use your back button. I don't know. I saw yours. I started looking at it, and it looked fine. But I don't remember exactly how many screens you plan on having. So how this is set up, if back button is fine with you. But just so you know, one thing that you can do is you can you can put buttons in there, and finish will get you back to the one you were at previously. But you can create another intent and go from one activity to another activity you haven't seen yet. You understand what I'm saying? So for instance, if you were setting up a game and you had different levels, when you reached a certain level, you might, as an example, set up an intent to bring up the next level on the screen, that kind of thing. And all throughout this, what they'll keep saying is, see if I can find an example. They'll go through and they'll say, hey, if you set up when you set up your project, I'll show you this right now. I'm just going to I don't need this one anymore, so I'm going to close it. And I'm going to open up a new project. You don't have to do this. But they're saying that if you come in there, I don't want to open an existing, I want to create a new. If you come in and you do if you do a different type of activity in here, all right, for instance, I think it's the basic one that if you do that, much of this stuff is going to be done for you, all right? So what I wanted to concentrate, what I do want to concentrate on right now, I'm going to jump all the way up to page 199, and I want us to talk about, come on, there. Okay, so it's page 201, talk about a recycler view, okay? Now I'm going to go through this very quickly because it's only 9 pages. And then when we get done, we're going to look at the developer.android.com for this. All right. And then I've got some notes on the other machine here. So I want to just transfer them over to here, and then we can start on what we're going to be doing. Okay. All right. So says when you display a large number of items in a scrollable list, most of them are not visible. What used to happen was the only thing that was available in here was what was called a list view, which was fine if I had a list of 500 names and I didn't want to do anything with them. I just had a list of a bunch of names. But the problem with using a list view, and it's hard to show it on here, but I'm going to try to anyway. So I'll just start a new empty activity. That's fine. So it used to be that when you came in here, let it build. So when you came in here and you looked at your common controls, this list view used to be in there. All right, you'd put it in, it wouldn't look any, it's like, who cares? It basically is taking up almost the whole screen right now, okay? But the point is, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot you could do with it. So they've changed it over time. And as I mentioned, it is now a legacy control. I'm going to just get rid of this. In fact, let's move this up to the top and imagine that's our heading or whatever. Okay, and I'm going to, let's see, clear all those constraints. I don't know if I've ever showed you this or not, but if you right mouse click in here and you choose, for example, constraints, all right, and organize, etc. Now notice there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with these. So I can clear the constraints in here, or I can constrain it to parent, top, parent. So if I constrain it to the top, boom, it put that in for me. Not that that's a big thing, but just so you know. Then I can change it. It's set to 16 now. I can make it 8-0 if I want to. It doesn't matter. But you can come in and constrain this stuff any way you want to. I'm just used to doing it the way that I've shown you, which is like this, and then like this, etc. But you don't even have to do it that way. There's a bunch of these things that if you right mouse click, you can center horizontally and vertically. I think that's what I was looking for, so I'll clear this. So notice if I come in here and I say center horizontally, see what it did? If I do want it to go right in the middle of the screen, I can center it vertically. See what that does? So I'm not saying you ever have to do any of that stuff, but you may want to. You may find that easier than the way I stretch this out. That's all. All right. So now I'm going to come in, and I don't want to use the legacy, so I'm going to use the common controls, and I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to grab a recycler view. I'm going to drag it in and let it go. And by default, it's real greedy. It tries taking up pretty much as much room as it possibly can. All right, don't worry about this. We're going to fix all this stuff later. The point is, if I run the program now, you'll see absolutely nothing, because it doesn't show until you fill it up with information. All right, and it's different because notice it's called a recycler view. Okay, so what we're going to have to do when we get started in here is we're going to go in and we're going to create a couple activities, and we're going to create an intent so that you're able to go back and forth between them. But then when we come in, it's like, okay, now what do I want to have happen on here? Well, one thing is, by default, All right, depending on how this is set up, right now, notice it says match parent. If we have 46 different presidents right now by default, each president's going to take up an entire page. Even if the picture is this big, even if it should take up this much, it's going to take up this much. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to change that. But then we have to go in and manually start jacking with this. And we're going to do that. Okay? All right. Now, I want to show you this. I wasn't going to show it to you until later, but I'm going to show it to you right now. So let's see. Okay. So create dynamic lists with Recyclerview for developers. All right. So you come in here. This is all fine. This is all dandy. The point is, they give you the code that you need. And this is where, I believe at least, you're going to struggle. All right. I was watching a video that this guy did, and I thought, well, maybe he's got some tricks. Maybe he could help. And he said, whenever I create an example that uses a Recyclerview, I open this up and I grab all the code, drag it in there, and just change it so it maps up with my names. I thought, oh, okay. I guess that actually does make sense. But there's a lot of different stuff that you have to do when you come in here. Now, notice you have to set up an adapter. We have to set up what's called a view holder. And when you set up the view holder, it makes you do some different things with a view holder. Makes you set up a create view holder, a bind view holder, and basically where you get a count of the number of things that are in your view. All right. All I'm trying to show you is what this is helping do is what we want is we want 46 times, we'll want there to be like a picture of the president, their name, and when they served. So for instance, if we had like Donald Trump, and you had his picture in there, and it would say like what, 2016 to 2020, or something like that. Does that make sense? Then you go to the next one, or we go, and then down on the next one would be here, and it would have a picture of Biden, and it would have, and I don't care if you say Joseph, how you say this, it doesn't matter, or Joe Biden. And then 2020, he's the only one who won't have an end date. All right. So we will set all this stuff up, but there's a few niceties in here, such as if we want to, we can copy in, and this is what I had the students do. We copied in and literally had all 46 pictures. All right. We don't have to do that. What we'll do is we'll just link to their pictures out on a website. And what we'll do in here, what this will actually be, basically, is a link to a URL. And it'll print out there and it'll show the picture, but it'll, we'll do it as a URL. I don't know if that makes sense or it doesn't make sense, but hopefully it does. All right. So this is something brand new we're going to have to set up. Then we're going to have to literally set up a layout. Now, right here, this is probably as simple a layout as you can see. All right. Ours is going to be different. I'm glad that's still up there because ours, we won't have a text view. Actually, we will. We'll have an image view and a text view and a text view. And we can do this in two different ways. All right. We could make that a string, or we could sit there and make it an integer and just have the year that they started, the year that they were elected. We can do it either way. All right. And I've seen examples like this out online too that are very similar to this. So in other words, what's the advantage or disadvantage of doing it either way? Well, if we did it this way, so we had it like this, a numeric sort would be pretty easy. But we'd know when they started, we wouldn't know necessarily where they ended. So if we eventually want to be able to sort this by their years in service, we can actually sort it either way. We can sort it as though they're numbers, and we can sort it as though they're strings. It should work just fine either way. All right. All right. So what this is right here then is you have to set up another layout. And that layout is for how you want each row in your Recyclerview to look. That's what it is. All right. And the other stuff that we saw in here, this stuff, is what this this adapter that you need, and you kind of look at it like a puzzle, that basically what it's doing is it wants to make sure, again, your program, okay, can talk to the stuff that you have in here. And it's even more than that, because this is really going to be the first time when we do this that we are going to create, we'll create a Java Presidents class. We'll have a class, a Java class called Presidents, that'll have what? Like a string for their first name, a string for their last name, a string. I was watching a similar one to this yesterday, and the guy just had name, and he had all the names in there, and he only did like 2 or 3 presidents. But I would have at least put in last name, comma, first name. This person didn't do that. So, for example, with the ones that he had, Barack Obama was first because of B. I think that's, why would you want to sort on first names? That didn't make sense to me. All right, so we'll do ours with last names. All right. Yeah, if I sound a little, I don't know, schizoid here, I thought we were going to be spending most of the period, going and working on uploading that thing to the Google Play Store. So I'm not happy right now. All right. So you can make them this simple and just do something like that. But that's, I mean, what exactly does that show? Not really a whole heck of a lot. Okay. And they do have it set up in here. Notice where you can click, and that's all fine and dandy. All right. But you're going to have to read these few pages, and you're going to have to read what I showed you before. And guess what? Even after you read them, it's not going to make a whole heck of a lot of sense. Right? Some of the stuff that's in there that I just showed you will make sense when you see it. Some of it won't. And I've gone and looked for the silver bullet, the magic explanation that someone has online that's really good, and I've never found it. All right, so I'll give you what I have, and it'll be okay, but it won't be at all great at all. So, all right, so here's another example, and they don't have any images in there. I thought it would make more sense to have images, look a little nicer, etc. And they also have, if you see here, and we'll add one of these. That's just a separator that we're going to put in here. And, is that hard to do? Well, how hard is it? If we look in here, oh, there used to be one that was called separator. We'll find it. It's not a big thing. All right. Okay. So here's the components. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that's in here probably won't make a lot of sense until we actually sit and do it. So Recyclerview components. To display your data in a Recyclerview, you need the following parts. Data. Well, what do you want to show? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to either hard code in stuff, or like I said, grab URLs and whatever. But eventually, I wouldn't mind to see if we could take, when we start talking a little bit about databases later on in the semester, if we could throw all this stuff into a database and bring it in from there. That would make more sense to do. All right. So you've got your data, you've got your Recyclerview. Okay. As it says, an instance of Recyclerview as defined in the activity. Yeah. Layout for one data item. That's what I mentioned here. Okay. So that's what you want each one of these rows here to look like. And you have to set up a layout manager for them. Is it hard? Not at all. Okay. All right. Then, as it says, an adapter. We already talked a little bit about this, but as it says, the adapter connects the data to the Recyclerview. I'm not going to sit and read this to you. You can take a look at it. Okay. Then you need what's called a view holder. And you may have noticed some of that code on there that talked about a view holder. As it says, the view holder contains the view information for displaying one item from the item's layout. So our one view holder is going to show one president. Okay. All right. So any displayable data can be shown in a Recyclerview. So you can put in anything you want. All right. And it's interesting because after we do this, I had talked to Mr. Corrigan and I asked him what he thought of having you guys walk around and getting a picture of everybody who works here. He thought that was really a neat idea, doing something like that. I don't know if we'll do it or not, but we'll see. Okay. So as it says, data can come from anywhere. So we can put it right in our app itself. You can grab it from a database. You can grab it from the internet. And guess what? We're going to grab our pictures from the internet directly. Why? Because the first time we do it, it's going to fail. And that's a good thing because it allows me to show you how we ask permissions in the manifest file so we're able to use the internet. Okay? All right. So, like I said, the rest of this is 5 pages or so. This isn't going to make a whole heck of a lot of sense until we do it. All right. And the bad news is, you know, I'm going to show you what I want you to do. All right. I've got that on the other machine, but we'll take a break first. And I'm going to have you set the project up because that'll help a lot for what we'll do tomorrow. We'll have a lot of it done already. All right. So, what's a recycler view? It's a scrollable container. Now, what's different is when you had a list view, if I had 50 items in a list view, it had to hold space for all 50 items. And if it was pretty complex, let's say it had a review for 50 different reviews or something, and each one of them was long, your program could get real long, and they could really be slow with a list view. The way that a recycler view is different is it holds about enough stuff in memory for about 5 to 10. And then when you start flicking up, it takes the ones that are now gone, it throws them away, and it replaces them with new ones. That's the recycle part of it. See, it uses the same thing, and it just keeps recycling the same area to put new stuff in again and again and again. That makes sense? Okay. As it says, uses only a limited number of views that are reused when they go off screen. In general, it keeps as many view items as it can fit on the screen. It says plus a few extra at each end so you know what's there. It tries to make it smooth as you're working your way through there. All right. The layout, as mentioned, it's kept in a separate file, and that's as I showed you. So you're letting the system know where different things are on your screen. Okay? All right. So if you have a layout, you need a manager for it. It's not hard to do. We'll do that in just a little bit. As it says, it positions the item, so it lets you know. And it's establishing associations. It's very similar to the layout managers you've been doing so far. What are those things doing? Well, you've either got text in there or you've got a picture of what it's supposed to look like and how it's laid out on the screen, and it's going to be the same way. Okay? All right. You can do animations. I didn't think a thing with a president was like a real great place for animations, but let's suppose that you wanted it set up that for, as an example, every single time you removed a record or you removed something, you could have the screen go like that. Or, when you added something, you could have it bounce. There's a lot of different stuff that you could do. What I thought of doing was, if we go back and do this and try to kind of replicate this with the people at Rankin, was having you possibly get a quote from each one of them and like even use your phone or something like that to get a quote. But then I thought, then these might get really big because a lot of times when you have image files, your program gets real big. So I'm still investigating that. Probably we won't do that, but we might. All right. Then there's the adapter. As it says, you have 2 incompatible interfaces right now. And basically that's what you've just created and what's available in Java right now. All right. So the system doesn't understand with a recycler view. It doesn't understand. You saw what it showed. It just showed like item 1, item 2. That's what it thinks it is. So once you go in and you start to customize it, you've got to let Java know, or Kotlin if you were using Kotlin, what you're doing. So as it says, it's helping these work together. So it connects the data that you have with the views that you're having to hold them. All right. And I mentioned this before, how it acts as an intermediary. Okay. It receives or retrieves data, does the work that's required, and puts them in the view. All right. So this is all the different stuff that we're going to be working with. It says the Recyclerview Adapter implements a view holder, and as soon as you put in a view holder, you're going to get error messages right away. A lot of error messages. Don't worry about it. There are certain things that you have to set up, and you set those up, and guess what? You still get error messages. But then you'll have to go in and right mouse click on where it shows you the error is, and it'll say, you must implement these methods. And as soon as you do that, boom, those errors will all go away. All right? Okay, so these are the big 3 that are in here that you have to implement. It says Oncreateviewholder. It inflates a view item and returns it. When you go and you click on one of these and you show a president, it's called, it takes that area that one that you have for one president, and it's, I don't know why they use this term, but they did. You're inflating it. Just like when you create a menu to actually show the menu on screen, you inflate the menu. Again, why they use those terms, I don't really know. All right. But it says this method is automatically going to be called when you need a new holder to represent an item. What does that mean? So maybe you can show 3 presidents on the screen at a time. All right, or 4, whatever it is. But as you start flicking your way through, it's going to have to call that Oncreateviewholder. So when you get down to the bottom, it's going to replace the ones that were there with the next 4. All right, and that's what they're talking about here. All right, then there's Onbind Viewholder, as it says, sets the contents of an item in a given position. It's got to make sure that when we do George Washington, he's number 1 and not number 46. Donald Trump is not number 1, that kind of thing, okay? The get item count is pretty simple. As it says, it just returns the total number of items. I mean, for ours, if we did it right, it should be returning 46 because that's how many presidents we've had, okay? All right, then they go into this in more depth. And the reason that earlier I showed you that thing out on developer.android.com is that gives you the code that they're explaining here because they don't give you the code. So if you wanted to be able to map it up, you could take a look at both of them. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. All right, but as it says here, the view holder describes an item and metadata about its place within the recycler view. Each view holder holds one set of data, in our case, 1 president. All right, and again, what I was thinking, I told you this before, but in case you forgot or didn't realize before what I was talking about, I'd like to set it up so that, for instance, you would go in there and take a picture of everybody who works here, and you'd have their name and the division they're in. That's it. You wouldn't have to have when they start. We're not going to put a boatload of information in. We could get a quote from each one of them, why you like ranking. If you want to do that, we could. But the point is this: what I'd like to do is set it up then so that when you're doing your sorting, you could sort it by what division they were in. So in other words, if you wanted to do it by division, you could have all of your IT people together, and you could have all of your diesel people together, and all of your automotive people together, etc. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So they go through all this stuff. As soon as you come in and you add a recycler view, now mine didn't do it, which surprised me. So they may have changed this since this writing right here. But it used to be what happened was when you came in here and you created this, when you created the recycler view, you'd get a message up that would say, hey, your Gradle file that's in here is out of date. You need to upgrade it so that it puts in basically a call to the recycler view. And as soon as you said, go ahead, do it, it did it for you automatically. Now, if I go into my module build Gradle file and I come in here and I search for Recyclerview, Recyclerview. All right, it's saying that there aren't any results. Usually it puts it right in here. So we'll check. All right, but when you start running it, you may get an error. It's not hard. You just literally have to click a couple buttons and it'll put everything in for you. All right, there's not a lot that's got to be done here is what I'm saying. So that's adding the dependency. Okay, so we're going to come into that Gradle file I just showed you, and on our dependency section, we just put that at the very bottom. That's it. Now we'll check to see what the current version of Recyclerview is. I don't know if it's still version 7.24.11. They recommend you always use the most current version. All right, no big thing. All right, then you add it. Well, we dragged it in, but we could just as well have written it like that too. Okay. Then, as it says, then we create the layout for one item. Sometimes it's just referred to as a record. So each record is, for each president, we have a record. President's name, president's picture, when they served, something like that. So that we'd have 46 of those. Okay. So as it says, you create the layout. You can do this again by hand, and they've only put a text view in there. We won't do it like that. We'll literally tell the system to come in and create it for us. All right. Then you come in and you create the adapter. This is, depending on your point of view, either where the fun begins or where it starts to get very hard to understand. All right. So you might say, oh, that's fine. It gets very hard to understand. Why the heck are we even doing it then? Because the majority of apps that are out there use a Recyclerview in one form or another. All right. And you'll notice we're only in section 4, so we're almost halfway through this book, 207 pages out of 434. They didn't give it much play in here, but they've got it fairly early in the book because they're saying that you might be using these in almost everything you do from now on. Okay. All right. Now, when you do this, the stuff they're showing here, it says we have to create a brand new class. And you can call it whatever you want. Now, we'll probably call ours something like President Adapter. Okay? And then we say that it extends. So in other words, it's a child of Recyclerview Adapter. So that's fine. But then you have to put this in here. So it's the name of the adapter that you just put in, dot the name of what's going to be your view holder. Now, by default, none of this stuff is put in there for you, just so you know. That's why you start to get all these errors. All right? But as soon as you put this in and it sees view holder, it doesn't understand that, so you'll get different errors. That's when you'll right mouse click on it. And when you do, it'll ask you if you want to implement those 3 methods that we looked at before. All right? And you'll say yes. It'll put them in there with just stubs. So it'll put like a line of code in there that doesn't really do anything. We'll have to add our own code to do stuff. All right. So in the constructor, get an inflator from the current, but there's all sorts of mistakes in here. That's the word context, not context. All right, and your data. So we'll have to set this up. We'll be able to use between this code and the other stuff. It's not like you'll have to write a lot of new stuff. All right. So it says it'll have these 3 methods then. These are the ones that I showed you. Oncreateviewholder to create a view and return it. Onbind Viewholder rather, to associate the data, and item count. Now, sometimes, and we'll probably do it that way, this is totally fine. But if there's nothing in there at all, so if we had a view holder, but we didn't have any data, sometimes when it returns 0 like that, the program, it'll give you an exception and it'll stop. So usually what people do is they check to make sure it's not null, meaning that there's something in it. And if it's not null, then you just return the size. That's all. And this is everyone's favorite method because that's all it is. Even if you put an if statement in there, it's 3 or 4 lines long. All right. Then as it says, you've got to come in, and this will be the first time we've done this. We're going to create a class inside of one of our classes. Totally legit to do in Java. When you put a class within a class, it's referred to as an inner class because it's inside a class inner or inside of another class. All right. So as it says there, we'll extend the view holder to create a new view holder item. We're going to do all this stuff. All right. Then we have to fill it up. In the constructor, the view holder has to inflate its layout, associate the adapter, and set a click listener. Why set a click listener? Well, what we will want to do with our program is we'll want to make sure that when we click on a president and we do like a long click, all right, which is like 3 or 4 seconds, that it's going to bring up another activity where we can go in. So if we made a mistake, let's say we accidentally put Washington's picture on Lincoln or something like that, we could change that. Does that make sense? All right. Or if we had a mistake in a spelling of a name or when they served or whatever. So we can change any of that stuff. All right. Then as it says, you create the recycler view. It says finally to tie it all together in your activities method. So this is an onCreate in main activity. The order in which you do this doesn't matter. We could do this first, but we'd get errors because we wouldn't have the recycler view made. Does that make sense? Or we can make the recycler view, nothing will be hooked up to it until we come back in and do this. That's all. All right. So you'll notice what we have to do in here is it says, get a handle to the recycler view. And I believe we don't have to do that anymore. Just we've talked about that before. You don't have to cast it. You can just do a find view by ID. Then you create the adapter, all right, which is going to refer to what's on the other page that we just looked at. Then you connect it. Then as it says, you give it a default layout manager. The stuff, it's not that it's hard or difficult. It's just, it's a little bit weird because I think most of the stuff we've done in here so far has been fairly straightforward. I don't know if you agree with that or disagree with that, but in my opinion, it has. All right. So let's take a break. It's 1:19. Let's take 15 and come back at 1:35. And I got to see if hopefully I've got all my notes. I made a bunch of stuff up yesterday that told you how I wanted you to make your, how to set up the activities and stuff. And you can do that. And like I said, for the rest of the period, hopefully you've got something that you can work on. And I'm sorry, like I said, I should have checked that yesterday, but I watched the tape instead. Wish I wouldn't have. No, that's okay. All right, so let's come back at 1:35, please.